Greetings, true believers. It's raining, and I'm the OGGM, and I'm drinking coffee. Support me. Coffee. It's Wednesday, the 7th of November, 2022. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. It's about 53 degrees and raining here at Site B. And we are doing our continuing holiday suggested buying guide for the tabletop role-playing gamer slash geek slash otaku slash fan slash person in your life, hobbyist in your life. We have looked at suggested gifts, best gaming accessories, adventure, stuff like that. Today we're going to recommend some campaign settings. This is another one that's on the list that was given to me. This was originally started by one of the people on my blog called Needs More Cowbell. Other people have since chimed in for ideas and suggestions for gift giving. Does the camera look foggy to you? It looks foggy to me. Or maybe it's just my glasses. I don't know. Maybe it's raining. Or maybe I'm going blind. At least my eyes are pretty. At least that's what my mom says. Okay, so this one is recommended tabletop role-playing game settings. So, this is kind of like just appropriate for any point of time, but really, right? Okay, so let's say you got a guy, girl, person, human in your life who's a gamer, and you don't really know what to get them. You've heard about these things called campaigns. And maybe they have their own campaign, maybe they don't have their own campaign. Maybe you're looking for a recommendation for a campaign to sort of kickstart them if they're like just getting into it, you know, and maybe they don't feel comfortable running their own campaign, so you want some suggestions. What would be a good campaign to start them? Now, that's kind of a broad subject, okay? Because then we get to defining what defines a campaign setting. Is a Pathfinder adventure path or a Dungeons & Dragons module series a campaign setting? I mean, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Is Kingmaker a campaign? Is Tomb of Annihilation a campaign? Or are they just adventures that are set in a campaign world? What is the definition of a campaign? And since there's so many things that could be considered part of the campaign, does, you know, mom, dad, brother, sister, significant other walk into friendly local game store and just say, give me everything that's ever been made for the Forgotten Realms because my significant other wants a D&D campaign? Well, that's like a couple hundred titles. So really we need to break down campaign settings, you know. So what would I recommend for a campaign setting to get the gamer in your life who maybe doesn't have a campaign setting yet and doesn't feel comfortable creating their own? And I'm going to say, you know what? Adventure paths are a really good way to start. Module slashes are really good way to start. These adventure paths usually start with level 1 and go to 5, 10, 15, 20th level. They come in multiple parts or they come all boxed together in one big collection. And they're kind of self-supporting. You don't need to really know what's going on over there in the world to run Storm King's Thunder or whatever. So my first recommendation for campaign settings for any genre would be adventure paths. The Paizo adventure paths, especially the Paizo Pathfinder First Edition adventure paths, are bar none brilliant. Amazingly written. You can get them one by one. You can get them as a collection. They are easily adaptable to any D20 fantasy system with very little work because they use the OGL. So you could run them using 5e, 4e, well, not 4e because 4e is so weird. So 5e, 3e, any OSR, OSE type style game. If it uses a D20, if it uses the OGL, you could take it at Pathfinder Adventure Path, and that could be a good starter campaign. Same with the D&D Wizards of the Coast and other company adventure paths, modules that have a beginning, middle, and end. Storm King's Thunder, you start at level 1, you work your way through all the way up to level 15, and it's all self-contained. It doesn't matter what's going on in the rest of the world. All that is the center of your character's attention, both directly and indirectly, are the events of Storm King's Thunder. So you could easily place any of the Wizards of the Coast D&D official ones or non-official ones in any world and run it from start to finish, and that would be a self-contained campaign setting. So before I recommend any campaign settings, which is really hard because, again, I don't know what you really would define as a campaign setting, I would say adventure paths or module series. Look for ones that say, over 10 pages. Like if it says on the back, play from level 1 to level 15, that's the kind of thing you're looking for, All right. Now, campaign settings. Does Dungeons and Dragons currently have a home campaign? It's not Greyhawk. Some people say some of the adventures are set in Greyheart. There's some argument over what's it called? I forgot the name. Anyways, because I'm an idiot and I obviously haven't had enough caffeine, or I'm just old and can't remember. Anyways, does 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons currently have a campaign setting? Some would say, well, Spelljammer. Spelljammer is the perfect campaign setting for 5e. If there's anything that Wizards of the Coast has made that truly emphasizes what it is Wizards of the Coast thinks 5e should be, it's Spelljammer. Unfortunately, Spelljammer came out and instantly jumped into the deep end of how problematic can we make a single product be. And Spelljammer was like, let me find out. So you might have some difficulty finding the Spelljammer campaign setting, at least the new one, but you shouldn't have any difficulty finding the older Spelljammer stuff. It'll be a lot cheaper, a lot better written, and there's tons of it. So is there an official 5e campaign setting? It's not Greyhawk. It's not Spelljammer. It's not the Magic the Gathering metaverse. It's not Dark Sun, that's for sure. It's not Ravenloft, though Ravenloft could be considered. Ravenloft is sort of a separate, its own campaign setting. So it's not, Points of Light or Mystara or any of the other ones. The Forgotten Realms was definitely 3 and 3.5's campaign setting. And the beginning of 5th edition definitely set in the Forgotten Realms. So if you could find the Forgotten Realms box set or the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or anything that sort of gives you a complete breakdown of the Forgotten Realms for 5e, that would probably be the official, or closest to the official setting for 5th edition. There's a lot of third-party campaign settings that I would recommend depending upon what you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for campaign settings that best emphasize the ideals of the superheroic roleplay that is 5e, you probably want to avoid anything that says dark, grim, gritty, low magic, mudcore, grim, end of the world, dark role playing, stuff like that. Yeah, that is sort of the antithesis of what 5th edition should be. If you want to get a campaign that really embraces what Wizards of the Coast thinks 5th edition should be in the mindset of 5e, you want to go with sort of lighter, more goofy, almost comic booky. 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is Saturday morning cartoon roleplay. Okay, it's very over the top. It's borderline superheroic. It's got a lot of ridiculous things. It's really not designed for these darker, grimmer, low-powered fantasy settings. But something like Iron Kingdoms would be perfect. Spelljammer or something like Spelljammer would be perfect. There's a lot of campaign settings out there that are really, get what 5e is about and run with it. So those would be the ones you're looking for. Now, what about other gaming companies? If there's third-party campaigns out there that I would say, yeah, some of these are worth your time. Most of them, I don't know, if you want to run 5e and you want to run a 5e campaign and have as little problem as possible, either go just try and find a copy of Spelljammer, whether it's the current one or the older one, and start there. Or pick up, some Forgotten Realms starter stuff. You can find the older stuff online for relatively inexpensive, still in good shape. Ed is constantly making new Forgotten Realms stuff on DM's Guild and will be to the day he dies. So there's tons of support. Third-party stuff, there's a lot. I don't know which one I'd recommend other than Iron Kingdoms is probably one of the ones. Anything that says like Miyazaki, kind of just sort of that comic booky Saturday morning cartoon style would be the perfect one. Now for non-fantasy campaign settings, because yes, they exist. Well, thankfully, most of the non-fantasy campaign settings have already been linked to major IPs. So you have very little trouble. And, the first one that would probably come to mind is, what are the major IPs that are constantly being bombarded by the media upon us? Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know. Did I say Star Wars? What else? James Bond? Are there any other major franchises? Jason Bourne, I guess. Zombies? Anything zombies. So these all have campaign settings for a multitude of systems. So if you want to go, I want to do a Star Wars tabletop role-playing game campaign setting. What's out there? Well, thankfully, Fantasy Flight Games, the current owner of the Star Wars IP, not Wizards of the Coast, not Hasbro. No, Star Wars is not canon with Dungeons and Dragons, have made a ton of stuff for the current Shadows of the Empire Star Wars setting, both official canon and their own stuff. If you're more interested in the older Star Wars, especially the extended universe stuff, I highly recommend the D6 West End Games Star Wars, which just recently celebrated its anniversary and released a brand new collection of the D6 West End games. This is, in my humble opinion, the best Star Wars game. It captures the feel of Star Wars better than any others. A lot of people argue that the D20 fantasy Star Wars game that TSR tried to put out, / Wizards of the Coast tried to put out, is actually the best because it really captures the feel of Star Wars. A lot of people argue that the current one from Fantasy Flight Games is the best Star Wars campaign setting. It's definitely going to be the easiest for you to find since it's already been boxed and done for you. You can just walk in and go, Star Wars campaign setting, bam, Fantasy Flight Games, bam, there it is, done. Here you go, Billy. Roleplay Star Wars with your cousins to your heart's content. But if you want to look for what I think is the best, especially if you're interested in the extended universe and, the Shadows of the Empire and the Old Republic stuff, West End Games, D6 Star Wars, which still is getting some support. Marvel! I want to do a Marvel superhero role-playing game campaign. There are tons and tons of superhero role-playing games out there that capture the Marvel feel. But if you want to get the official Marvel Universe role-playing game, there's a new one coming out in 2023, which I play-tested and was kind of but it's coming out, and I'm sure there'll be some support for it. But really, Phase Rip Marvel is still available. You can still find copies of it for relatively cheap. There is still tons of support for Phase Rip Marvel, the role-playing game, and it is still, in my humble opinion, one of, if not the best superhero role-playing games ever written. There's still support, so if you want to get a campaign that does Marvel, just look for Marvel, the tabletop role-playing game from TSR, or just look up Phase Rip Marvel, and bam, I want to run a campaign set in the 5-year space between, the blip. Bam, here you go. People have already done it. Okay, what about DC? DC's a harder one. There's been a lot of DC comic role-playing games. Blood of Heroes, the official DC Comics role-playing games, a couple other ones. There is a Batman role-playing game coming out. May actually already be out by the time you hear this video. So again, if you want to do I want to run a campaign, I want to get my kids a campaign set in DC universe, there's several Gotham guides and DC guides, stuff like that, and there's several superhero systems out there that could easily emulate the feel of DC. So 3 major IPs that have instant recognition that aren't D&D, Star Wars, DC, Marvel, all have support, both officially and unofficially, and there are tons of campaigns out there that capture the feel of Marvel, of DC, and of Star Wars, including actual official Marvel, DC, and Star Wars role-playing games. Now moving on to like James Bond, Pirates of the Caribbean, zombies. Yeah, there's tons of stuff out there, all designed to emulate that style of play. But most people, when they're going to go, okay, what is the suggested tabletop role-playing game campaign setting for the gamer in my life? 90% of you are thinking Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy. So again, I'm going to say in closing, probably your number one choice is to get an adventure path, especially if it's somebody who's just starting out. and maybe doesn't feel comfortable with all the min-max behind-the-scenes management that goes into running a campaign world. An adventure path has a beginning, middle, and all the work has been done for you, so you can just jump in, feel comfortable, run it in parts, so you don't have to worry about what's 15 episodes ahead, because it's written in a first through whatever style. It's open enough. Most of them are open enough, except for Call of the Netherdeep, which is the worst module of campaign I've ever been on, that if you decide to go in unusual paths or suggestions or directions in the campaign, 90% of the adventure paths are written with the, well, if your players decide to do X, or, well, what do I do if my players decide to do something completely off kilter? Well, here's some other ideas you could toss out there, some suggestions, some sub-adventures, some ways to get them back on course, some ways to, continue without knowing they're continuing. Yeah, adventure paths are great. Any one of the Paizo Pathfinder First Edition adventure paths are great. Link down below. Most of the third-party D&D 5e adventure campaign modules, and pretty much all the official Wizards of the Coast campaign modules like Storm King's Thunder, Ravenloft, Tomb of Annihilation, are all written as first through whatever level of campaigns and are self-contained, so you don't really need to worry about the rest of the D&D universe. Everything you need to run a campaign is right there in that module. You could run Storm King's Thunder beginning, middle, and end, and never, that could be a year or longer worth of playing, and never have to worry about, what's going on over here in the campaign world. All you have to worry about is what's in that little box. So that would probably be my number one suggestion. Other than that, there's third-party stuff out there for D20 fantasy. There's stuff out there for superheroes, Star Wars, space, science fiction, horror. Find out what they like, and then just go and say, okay, this is what the gamer in my life wants. I want a campaign that does Star Wars or Traveler or zombies or pirates or pizza making. And chances are it's out there or can be found. Whew, that was exhausting. Anyways, that's it. Happy holidays. If you like any of the suggestions, let me know. I've included a link to the Paizo adventure paths and some of the other stuff I mentioned, like Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars, and a few of the other things. So links in the description. And of course, the best thing to get the gamer in your life is official OGGM merch. Yes, I have merch. I have t-shirts, stickers, notebooks, three published adventures up on Big Geek Emporium, and a ton of other stuff coming out. So yeah, really, why get them, when you can get them an OGGM shirt? That's really the best gift you can get them, right? Is something that supports me. See ya!